I've been waiting 7 years to write this post. Not because I needed to heal or find the right words. I've known exactly what I would say since I was 17, standing in my Aunt Gloria's backyard with 52 relatives laughing at me while I ate from a dog bowl. I just needed to be in the right position first, and now I am. My brother Philip was born in 1999. My parents had just closed on their house, my dad Dominic had gotten promoted, everything was perfect. Philip was their victory lap baby. Then 4 years later, I came along, and according to my mother Patricia, I ruined everything. She had complications during pregnancy, had to quit her job. My dad took extra shifts, and they blamed me for existing, not subtly, directly, verbally, constantly. Philip was planned. I was the accident that cost them their savings. Philip had a bedroom. I had a mattress in the unfinished basement until I was 12. Philip got birthday parties. I got a card if they remembered. Philip's report cards went on the fridge. Mine went in the trash because why celebrate mediocrity from someone who shouldn't be here anyway? My aunts knew. My uncles knew. My grandmother Gloria thought it was hilarious. The whole family treated me like some stray dog my parents were too weak to put down. Yo, folks, I need you to understand something. This isn't some Disney villain backstory where parents are just kind of cold and distant. This is a coordinated, family-wide campaign against a child. 52 people looked at a kid sleeping on a basement mattress and collectively decided, yeah, that's about right. Grandma Gloria thought it was content. She was entertained. You ever meet someone whose entire personality is cruelty, but they've convinced themselves it's just having a sense of humor? That's this whole bloodline. These people would have thrived in medieval times watching public executions with a bag of popcorn. I'm not writing this for sympathy about my difficult childhood. I'm writing because 3 days ago I finally did something about it, and now my phone has 44 missed calls. The reunion was at my Aunt Tiffany's house. I'm 24 now and hadn't been to a family event in 6 years since I left for college and cut contact. But my grandfather Reginald is turning 80, and he's the one person who was never cruel to me. He helped pay for my first semester when my parents refused. When he personally asked me to come, I said yes. I knew it was a trap. I knew my parents would use it to humiliate me. But here's what everyone needs to understand. I wanted them to try. I spent 6 years building a life specifically so I would have leverage when this moment came. I graduated with honors. I work in commercial real estate. I make more in a quarter than my father makes in a year. I own property. I did all of that partly for a good life, but also because I knew eventually they would need something from me, and I wanted to be positioned to destroy them when they came asking. Folks, this person didn't just leave and build a better life. They built a fortress. They built an entire empire with a moat and archers on the walls, and they did it while taking notes. 6 years of strategic planning. You know what most of us do after trauma? We go to therapy, maybe journal, eat our feelings. This person said, I'm going to get a degree, stack money, and wait. That's not healing. That's a military campaign. This is what happens when you bully someone smart enough to remember everything and patient enough to wait. You're not raising a victim. You're raising your own personal supervillain origin story. So when I pulled up Saturday and my mother was holding 2 custom t-shirts with that smile she gets before being cruel, I wasn't surprised. I was ready. She handed me the white shirt. Genetic mistake in block letters. Phillips said, the only son that matters. She said she'd ironed them both the night before, added, it was nice to finally have honesty in this family, because God knows they tried with me. My father was laughing. Philip wore his like a badge. Most people would have refused, caused a scene, left, cried. But I smiled and said, sure. I put that shirt on and walked into that backyard with 52 relatives staring, and I did not flinch, because I knew something they didn't. I knew my grandfather had changed his will 3 months ago, and I knew exactly who was getting the house. This mother spent an evening with an iron, pressing letters onto fabric, thinking about how to maximize her child's humiliation at a family gathering. She went to bed satisfied, woke up excited, probably had her coffee thinking, today's going to be a good day. Guys, there's evil. And then there's evil that crafts, evil that puts in hours. And she handed this shirt over thinking she won. She thought this was checkmate. She didn't realize she was playing checkers while her son had been setting up a chessboard for 6 years. Wearing that shirt wasn't defeat, it was bait. This man walked into that backyard like, yeah, keep laughing. Screenshot this moment. You're going to want to remember exactly how confident you all felt. Update 1. All right, so a lot of you wanted to know what happened at dinner and why my father won't stop calling. Buckle up because it gets worse before it gets better. Or maybe it just gets worse for them. Depends on your perspective. So there I am, wearing this genetic mistake shirt, walking through Aunt Tiffany's backyard, and my relatives are having the time of their lives. My uncle is making jokes about how at least my parents have one good son. My Aunt Gloria is asking, if I want my food served in a bowl on the floor like old times. My mother is beaming because this is her favorite thing, watching me get humiliated in front of an audience. And I'm just smiling because I've been talking to my grandfather Reginald for the past 2 years, every Sunday. While my parents and Philip were too busy to visit him at the assisted living facility, I was there. I drove 2 hours every single week. Not because I'm a saint, let's be real. I did it partly because he's the only family member who treated me like a human, but also because I knew he was sharp enough to see what was happening and wealthy enough to do something about it. Dinner happened. They sat me at the kids' table even though I'm 24. Philip got the seat next to Grandpa with a custom nameplate. I got a folding chair by the garage door. My mother made a big show of serving everyone before me, telling me, family eats first, and I could have scraps if there were any. 52 people watched and laughed. 2 years, 104 Sundays, 400 hours of driving minimum. While the golden child Philip was probably posting Instagram stories about family first from his couch. See, this is what people don't understand about neglected kids who make it out. They don't forget how to show up for people. They learned early that love isn't automatic, so when they choose to give it, they commit. Meanwhile, Philip has a custom nameplate at the table because, what? Because he exists? Because he answered the genetic lottery correctly? Grandpa's sitting there watching his favorite grandson enjoy his throne, while the other one drives 2 hours every week just to talk. Old people notice everything. They got nothing but time to observe who's real. Then my grandfather stood up to make an announcement. He said he wanted to talk about his estate while everyone was together. My father immediately perked up because that house is worth about $800K, and my parents have been counting on it for their retirement. They've made financial decisions based on inheriting that property. My mother once told me directly that they didn't need to save because Grandpa's house would take care of everything. Grandpa said he'd been thinking about legacy and what matters. He talked about how families should treat each other, how he'd been watching closely these past few years. My mother was nodding along, probably already mentally redecorating. Then he said he'd decided to leave the house to his grandson, who actually showed up, who visited, who cared. He pointed at me. The silence in that backyard was immediate. My father's face went from smug to confused to furious in about 3 seconds. My mother started sputtering that there must be a mistake, that Philip was the one who called on holidays, that I was the one who abandoned the family. Philip just sat there looking like someone had slapped him. My grandfather cut her off. He said he had phone records. He knew exactly who called and who didn't. He said he wasn't senile, and he could see clearly who treated him like a person and who treated him like an inheritance. Then he sat down and asked someone to pass the potatoes. Phone records. This 79-year-old man pulled up the receipts. Guys, Grandpa didn't just make a decision. He built a legal case and then asked for potatoes like he didn't just detonate a nuclear bomb in the middle of a family dinner. And look, I need to talk about Patricia for a second. This woman based her entire retirement plan on someone else's death. No savings, no 401k, just vibes and the assumption that Grandpa would die on schedule and hand over the bag. That's not financial planning. That's sitting at a slot machine waiting for someone's heartbeat to stop. And now she's sputtering about phone calls? Ma'am, your father-in-law has been keeping spreadsheets while you've been keeping delusions. My father cornered me by the garage an hour later. He started with the nice approach, saying, "We should talk about this as a family, that Grandpa was clearly being manipulated, that I should think about what's fair." I told him fair would have been not making me sleep in a basement for 12 years. Fair would have been not making me wear a shirt calling me a mistake. He got angry and said, "I was always ungrateful, that they fed me and housed me and I owed them." I said I owed them nothing. Then he said something that made everything click. He said Grandpa's house was supposed to fix everything, that they'd taken out a second mortgage assuming they'd inherit, that without that house, they'd lose their own home within 2 years. And you know what? I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because I spent 17 years feeling everything for people who felt nothing for me. My mother tried next. More in part 3, including what Philip did that made this 10 times worse. We fed you and housed you. The audacity. Folks, that's called the legal minimum for not going to prison. You don't get a medal for meeting the bare requirements of not being charged with child neglect. We gave you food and a roof. Yeah, dog bowl food and a basement roof. But sure, let's call that parenting. And this man, this grown man, just admitted he gambled his family's financial future on inheriting money from someone he couldn't be bothered to visit. That's not a retirement plan. That's a casino addiction dressed up in a button-down shirt. They spent 20 years treating their son like trash and genuinely expected him to feel bad that their house of cards is collapsing. The emotional bankruptcy in this family is staggering. Update 2. So after my father's little financial confession by the garage, my mother decided it was her turn to try a different approach. And let me tell you, watching Patricia attempt emotional manipulation when I've had 17 years to study her tactics was almost entertaining. Almost. She found me near the food table about an hour after the announcement. She started with the wounded mother act, saying, "She couldn't believe I would do this to the family, that she sacrificed so much for me, that childbirth nearly killed her, and this is how I repay her?" I let her go for about 5 minutes because I wanted to hear exactly how she'd spin 20 years of abuse into her being the victim. Then I asked her one simple question. I asked her if she remembered the dog bowl. She said, she didn't know what I was talking about. I reminded her that when I was 9 years old, she made me eat Thanksgiving dinner from a ceramic dog bowl on the floor because I got a C on a math test. She said, I was exaggerating. I told her Aunt Tiffany has photos somewhere because she thought it was funny enough to document. My mother's face changed real fast after that. She dropped the wounded act and went straight to threats. She said, Grandpa wasn't in his right mind, that they could contest the will, that I'd spend years in court fighting them. I told her to go ahead and try. I told her I had 2 years of weekly visit logs, text messages, and Grandpa's doctor on record saying he's mentally sharp. I told her I'd been preparing for this exact conversation since I was 17 years old. 17 years of preparation. This isn't revenge. This is a dissertation. This person defended their thesis against their own mother and came with citations, sources, and peer review. Patricia tried 3 different manipulation playbooks in one conversation: victim, amnesiac, and lawyer. Guys, abusers always have selective memory. They remember every single thing you did wrong, but somehow 20 years of cruelty just vanished? She made a 9-year-old eat from a dog bowl and filed that under Normal Tuesday, don't recall. But her son? Her son kept receipts. Literal documentation, visit logs, text messages, doctor's letters. This man showed up to an emotional gunfight with a filing cabinet. She walked away after that. But here's where Philip comes in and makes everything worse. See, Philip has never had to work for anything. Everything was handed to him. So his approach to problems is basically to throw a tantrum until someone fixes it. Sunday morning, the day after the announcement, Philip drove to Grandpa's facility. I know this because Grandpa called me right after to tell me what happened. Philip showed up demanding Grandpa change the will back. When Grandpa refused, Philip started yelling about how I was manipulating a sick old man, how I only visited to steal the inheritance, how I was the bad seed of the family and everyone knew it. He called Grandpa senile to his face. He said, Grandpa was too confused to see what I really was. Grandpa is 79 years old and sharp as anyone I know. He served in the military for 20 years. He built a business from nothing. And my brother just called him a confused old man who couldn't make his own decisions? Philip really drove to a nursing home to yell at his grandfather. Let that marinate. His strategy for getting back into a will was to scream at the person writing it. Folks, this is what happens when you raise a child with 0 consequence. They genuinely don't understand that actions have reaction. In Philip's mind, the universe has always bent to accommodate his tantrum. Mom and Dad always fixed it. Teachers probably got talked to. Problems just dissolved. So he walked into that facility thinking he could bully an 80-year-old veteran into compliance, a man who served 20 years in the military, who built a business from scratch. Philip really looked at that resume and thought, yeah, I can intimidate this guy. The delusion is almost impressive. So Grandpa called his lawyer Monday morning, and here's the part that made my phone explode with 44 missed calls. Grandpa didn't just keep me in the will, he added a clause. If anyone in the family contests the will or claims he was mentally unfit, the entire estate goes to charity. Every penny. The house, the savings, everything. Philip's tantrum didn't just fail to change Grandpa's mind. It guaranteed that if my parents try to fight this legally, they get nothing. And now, my family is in full panic mode. My father has called me 17 times. My mother sent my Aunt Gloria to guilt trip me. Philip is blaming me for what he did, saying, I should have warned him that Grandpa would react that way. But here's the new problem. My Aunt Tiffany just texted me. She said my parents are planning something for Grandpa's actual birthday party next weekend. She doesn't know details, but she overheard them talking about making sure the family sees who I really am. They're not giving up. And honestly, I'm counting on it. Grandpa said, if you even breathe wrong, it all goes to charity. This man put a dead man's switch on his own will. That's not just smart, that's tactical warfare. He watched his family treat his grandson like garbage for 2 decades, saw his other grandson storm into his home screaming about senility, and said, you know what? Let me make this interesting. And Philip is now blaming his brother because nobody warned him that being verbally abusive to his elderly grandfather might have consequences? Guys, this family has never encountered the concept of accountability. It's like watching someone touch a hot stove and then blame you for not telling them fire was hot. The entitlement is generational. It's been passed down like a cursed heirloom. Final update. Grandpa's 80th birthday party was last Saturday. I drove up knowing my parents had something planned, and honestly, I was looking forward to seeing what desperate people do when they're about to lose everything. Their plan was actually clever, I'll give them that. They'd invited Grandpa's old friends from his military days, people who hadn't seen him in years. My mother spent the week before calling these men, telling them she was worried about Grandpa's mental state, that he'd been making strange decisions, that he seemed confused and easily manipulated. She was laying groundwork to have witnesses who would later testify that Grandpa wasn't competent when he changed his will. I know this because Aunt Tiffany told me everything. She'd been listening to their planning sessions all week and feeding me information. Not because she suddenly loves me, but because she's terrified that if my parents contest the will and trigger the charity clause, she loses her own small inheritance. Self-interest is a beautiful thing. Patricia really spent a week cold-calling elderly veterans to plant seeds about her father-in-law's mental decline. She created a whole campaign, a phone tree of manipulation. Folks, the amount of energy this woman puts into cruelty could power a small city. If she had invested this much effort into, I don't know, being a decent parent, we wouldn't be here. And Aunt Tiffany becoming a double agent purely because she's scared of losing her cut? That's the most honest motivation in this entire story. No redemption arc. No, I realized I was wrong. Just pure, if they mess this up, I lose money. At least she's transparent about being terrible. Refreshing, honestly. So I showed up prepared. I brought 2 years of visit logs. I brought printouts of every text conversation between me and Grandpa. I brought a letter from his doctor confirming his mental acuity dated 3 days prior. And I brought something else. I brought the photos. See, Aunt Tiffany wasn't the only one who documented my childhood. Grandma Gloria, before she passed, kept a photo album. She thought the way my parents treated me was hilarious, and she wanted memories. That album has pictures of me eating from the dog bowl, pictures of my basement mattress, pictures of the t-shirts, pictures of birthday parties where I wasn't allowed at the table. Grandpa gave me that album 2 months ago. When my father started his speech at the party about how worried the family was about Grandpa's decision-making, I stood up. I walked to the front of the room, and I started passing around photos. I didn't say anything dramatic. I just let 50 people look at actual evidence of what my childhood was. Photo after photo of a little kid being treated worse than most people treat animals. The military friends my mother had recruited, very quiet. My Aunt Gloria left the room. My mother tried to grab the photos, but there were too many copies already circulating. Grandma Gloria kept a scrapbook of child abuse because she thought it was comedy? She literally curated evidence for years, preserved it, probably showed it to friends at bridge night. And that same scrapbook became Exhibit A at the trial she never expected. Guys, there's something almost poetic about cruelty documenting itself. Every photo they took laughing at this kid became a bullet point in their own destruction. These people were so confident in their power, so certain they'd never face consequences, that they created a paper trail of their own monstrosity. They photographed the dog bowl. They documented the basement. They made copies. And now 50 people are watching those images circulate in silence, while the mother who did all this tries to grab them back like she can unring that bell. You can't. Those photos exist forever now. My father tried to explain. He said, "It was discipline." He said, "I was a difficult child." He said, "I was exaggerating the context." I asked him to explain the context of a 9-year-old eating from a dog bowl. He couldn't. Grandpa stood up and thanked everyone for coming. He said he was proud to be turning 80, proud of his legacy, and proud that at least one of his grandchildren turned out to be a decent human being despite everything working against him. Then he asked my parents to leave. They left. Philip followed. The party continued without them. That was 6 days ago. My parents' second mortgage payment is due in 3 weeks, and they have no. Philip won't return anyone's calls. And I just got home from another Sunday visit with Grandpa. My mother ironed those shirts smiling because she thought she'd finally have some honesty in this family. She was right, just not the way she expected. Explain the context of a 9-year-old eating from a dog bowl. There is no context. There is no explanation. There is no spin that makes that acceptable. And Dominic stood there with his mouth open because for the first time in his life, he couldn't talk his way out of photographic evidence in front of witnesses. Guys, I want you to remember something. This person didn't yell, didn't make speeches, didn't give some dramatic monologue about their trauma. They just handed out photos and asked one question. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is simply tell the truth and let it sit there. And that last line, my mother ironed those shirts smiling because she thought she'd finally have some honesty in this family. She got exactly what she wanted. 20 years of truth, documented, distributed, and undeniable.